The champagne flute shatters against the marble floor, sending crystal shards skittering across the private dining room like diamonds scattered in the wake of destruction. Mira Taylor stands frozen, expensive red wine dripping from her natural curls, the liquid trailing down her brown skin and staining the crisp white shirt of her uniform. The blonde woman in the designer dress laughs. The sound sharp and cruel. That's what happens when trash thinks it can serve real people. Myra's hands tremble, not from fear, but from the effort it takes to stay silent, to keep her dignity intact when everything inside her screams to fight back. She needs this job. Her daughter needs her to keep this job. But then the door opens. The temperature in the room drops 10 degrees as a man in a $1,000 suit steps inside, his presence filling every corner of the space with an authority that needs no introduction. Benjamin Giordano doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Repeat what you just said. His voice is velvet wrapped around steel, each word precise and lethal. The blonde woman's laughter dies in her throat. Around them, the restaurant falls into a silence so complete that Mira can hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Benjamin's dark eyes sweep over Mira, taking in the wine, soaked uniform, the trembling hands she's trying to hide, the proud tilt of her chin despite the humiliation burning in her chest. Then his gaze shifts to the blonde woman, and Mira sees something in his expression that makes her blood run cold. Recognition and rage. What happens when someone humiliates the wrong person in front of the most dangerous man in New York? Mira Taylor is about to discover that some protectors wear expensive suits and carry secrets darker than the night itself. Benjamin Giordano built his empire on respect and fear in equal measure. Cross him and you disappear. But disrespect someone under his protection. That's when the real monster emerges. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about a single mother working 3 jobs to keep her daughter fed, who never imagined that one humiliating moment would change her entire world. It's about a man who's forgotten what it means to feel anything beyond cold calculation until he sees genuine dignity in the face of cruelty. The blonde woman in the designer dress made one catastrophic mistake. She assumed that wealth and status made her untouchable. She assumed that a black waitress was invisible, powerless beneath notice. She forgot that in Benjamin Giordano's world, respect isn't given based on bank accounts or skin color. It's earned through character. And watching Mira stand tall despite being drenched in wine, refusing to break despite the humiliation, Benjamin sees something he hasn't seen in years. Someone worth protecting. Keep watching to discover how one moment of cruelty becomes the catalyst for an empire's most dangerous romance. 3 hours earlier, Mira Taylor had been having a good day. Relatively speaking, her daughter Nyla's fever had finally broken after 2 sleepless nights. The electric bill was paid, late but paid, and she'd managed to pick up an extra shift at Rossi, the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, which meant she might actually make rent this month without having to choose between groceries and her daughter's asthma medication. The morning sunlight streamed through the cracked window of their studio apartment in the Bronx as Mira twisted her natural curls into a neat bun, studying her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her mother's eyes looked back at her. The same warm brown, the same stubborn set to her jaw that had carried 3 generations of Taylor women through impossible circumstances. "You're strong, baby girl," her mother used to say. "They can take everything else, but they can't take your dignity unless you give it to them." Mira had held on to that dignity through her ex-boyfriend abandoning her when she was 6 months pregnant. Through working as a housekeeper, while finishing her business degree online, one class at a time, through watching other people live the life she'd once dreamed of, while she served them overpriced food with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. But dignity didn't pay bills. Hard work did. If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us as we continue bringing these stories to life. By 3 p.m., she was walking through the staff entrance of Rossi, tying her apron with practiced efficiency. The restaurant gleamed with old money and new excess, crystal chandeliers that cost more than her yearly salary, white tablecloths so pristine they looked like fresh snow, and a wine list that required a sommelier with a master's degree to navigate. Taylor, you're on the private dining room tonight, Victor, the floor manager, announced. He was a thin man with perpetually worried eyes, the kind of person who'd sold his soul to customer service years ago and couldn't remember what his own opinion looked like anymore. VIP client, big spender. Do not screw this up. When have I ever screwed up? Mira asked, adjusting her name tag. There's always a first time, these people. Victor lowered his voice, glancing toward the kitchen. They expect perfection. They can smell desperation. So whatever's happening in your life, leave it at the door. Mira thought about Nyla, probably watching cartoons at their neighbor Mrs. Chen's apartment right now, about the acceptance letter to the MBA program she'd received last week, full scholarship, her ticket to a better life that she couldn't accept because she couldn't afford to work less hours, about the hole in her left shoe that she'd stuffed with cardboard this morning. My life stays at the door, she said quietly. It always does. The private dining room was a study in excessive elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, the autumn leaves turning the world into a painting of golden crimson. The table could seat 12, but was set for 6, each place setting worth more than Myra's monthly rent. The VIP party arrived at 7 sharp. 3 couples in their 30s, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. The women wore dresses that cost thousands, their jewelry catching the light with every movement. The men wore suits tailored so perfectly they looked like second skins, watches that could fund a college education gleaming on their wrists. And then there was her, the blonde woman in the red dress who walked like she owned not just the room, but the entire city. Callista something hyphenated something. Old money married to new money. The type of wealth that made people invisible to her unless they were serving a purpose. Finally, Callista said, not looking at Mira as she swept into the room. I'm starving. Bring us the Ballinger, and don't even think about pouring until I taste it. Of course, Mira said, her voice professionally pleasant. I'll be right back with Did I Say You Could Speak? Callista's blue eyes finally focused on Mira, and there was something in that gaze that made Myra's skin prickle. Not just contempt, sport. When I want her opinion, I'll ask for it. Right now, I want champagne. Can you manage that, or do I need to request someone more competent? The other guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. That was how it worked in this world. Mira had learned. Money bought silence from witnesses. Right away, Mom, Mira said, holding on to her dignity like a lifeline. She fetched the champagne, $800 a bottle. She noticed enough to cover her groceries for 2 months, poured it with steady hands, served the first course of oysters with mignonette sauce, brought the second course of lobster bisque, cleared plates, refilled water glasses, moved through the choreography of service with the grace she'd perfected over 3 years of luxury dining, and through it all, Callista watched her with those cold blue eyes waiting. The moment came during the main course. Mira was serving the duck confit, leaning carefully to place the plate in front of Callista when the blonde woman suddenly shifted in her chair. Myra's hand jolted and 3 drops of sauce, just 3, landed on the pristine white tablecloth. Are you kidding me? Callista's voice cut through the polite conversation like a blade. You're getting grease on my table. I apologize, Mom. Let me let you what? Ruin my entire evening. Do you have any idea how much I spent on this dress? Callista stood abruptly, and Mira saw it coming, but couldn't move fast enough. The glass of red wine hit her face with enough force to make her stumble backward. The liquid was cold, shocking, soaking through her uniform and into her skin. The crystal glass fell next, shattering at her feet in an explosion of sound. That's what happens when trash thinks it can serve real people, Callista said. Fan. She was laughing now, the sound bouncing off the walls. Mira stood there dripping, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to move, to run, to do something. But she'd learned long ago that running only made things worse, that fighting back when you had no power just meant you'd lose everything. So she stood straight, lifted her chin, and looked Callista directly in the eyes. I'll get you a new glass, ma'am, she said quietly, and her voice didn't shake, not even once. That was when the door opened. Mira felt him before she saw him. A shift in the air pressure, a change in the room's energy that made everyone freeze mid-breath. She turned, wine still dripping from her hair, and saw the man in the doorway. He was tall, 6 feet 3 inches at least, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on ancient Roman coins. All sharp angles and dangerous beauty. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, and probably cost more than her car. But it wasn't the expensive clothes that made Myra's breath catch. It was his eyes, dark, almost black, and completely focused on her. Not through her, not past her, but on her, seeing everything, the humiliation and the fury and the desperate grip she had on her dignity. Then those dark eyes shifted to Callista, and Mira watched something cold and terrifying slide across his expression like a mask settling into place. "Repeat what you just said," Benjamin Giordano said softly, and the world held its breath. The most dangerous man in New York just walked into a room where someone humiliated his employee. But here's what you don't know yet. Benjamin Giordano doesn't just own Rossi Restaurant. He owns half of Manhattan, and the other half knows better than to cross him. Callista, whatever her name is, thought she was untouchable. Old money, new connections, the kind of woman who's never faced consequences for her cruelty. She saw a black waitress and assumed invisibility. She assumed powerlessness. She forgot to check who actually signs the paychecks. But this isn't just about revenge, though that's coming. Swift, brutal, and absolutely justified. This is about what happens when a man who's built his entire empire on cold calculation suddenly feels something he hasn't felt in 10 years. Fury. Pure protective fury. Benjamin Giordano has killed for less than what he just witnessed. He's destroyed entire family lines for showing him disrespect. So, what will he do to someone who humiliated an innocent woman just trying to earn enough money to feed her daughter? More importantly, what will happen when Mira Taylor, who spent her entire life being invisible, suddenly finds herself under the protection of the most feared man in the city? The answer starts with 4 words that will change everything. You don't work here anymore. But who is he talking to, Mira or Callista? Keep watching to find out. The silence after Benjamin Giordano's words stretched like a rubber band pulled to breaking point. Everyone in the room seemed to have forgotten how to breathe, and Mira found herself caught in that strange frozen moment, wine dripping from her curls onto the imported marble floor. Callista recovered first, her laugh brittle and nervous. "Excuse me, do you have any idea who I am?" "My husband is—" "I know exactly who your husband is," Benjamin interrupted, his voice still that same soft, lethal tone. "Bruno White, hedge fund manager, currently under investigation by the SEC for insider trading, though he thinks no one knows yet." He took a step into the room, and Callista took an instinctive step back. "I know who you are, too, Mrs. White. I know about the 3 DUIs your father paid to make disappear. The boutique on Fifth Avenue that's laundering money for a gambling operation, the personal assistant you fired last month for getting pregnant." Callista's face had gone from red to white. "You can't." "I can." Benjamin's eyes were black ice. "In fact, I just did. You're banned from this establishment. From every establishment I own, actually, which is most of them in this city. Your membership at the Metropolitan Club revoked. Your table at purse given away. That charity gala you're hosting next month at the plaza?" He smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Mira had ever seen. The venue just became unavailable. "This is insane," Callista sputtered, looking around at her companions for support. They were all suddenly very interested in their plates. "You can't do this because of some waitress." The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. "Her name," Benjamin said, and now there was nothing soft about his voice at all, "is Mira Taylor. You will use it, and then you will apologize to her on your knees." The room went so quiet that Mira could hear the traffic on the street below, the distant honking of taxis, and the rumble of the subway. Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest, a mixture of vindication and fear and something else she couldn't quite name. "You can't be serious," Callista whispered. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Mira watched as the blonde woman's face went through a series of rapid calculations. Pride versus pragmatism, ego versus self-preservation. For a moment, she thought Callista might actually do it, might actually drop to her knees on this expensive floor and apologize. Then Callista's chin lifted. Go to hell. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, trying to push past Benjamin. He didn't move, didn't even shift his weight, and she bounced off him like he was a wall. For a moment, they were face to face, and Mira saw real fear flash across Callista's features. You have 24 hours to leave New York, Benjamin said quietly. After that, every door in this city closes. Every friend stops taking your calls. Every favor you think you're owed gets called in. By me. This is the only mercy you'll get, Mrs. White. I suggest you take it. Callista fled. Her companions scrambled after her, not even bothering with their coats. And suddenly the private dining room was empty, except for Mira and Benjamin, and the wreckage of broken crystals scattered across the floor like stars. Mira realized she was shaking. Not from fear, though there was plenty of that. Staring at this man who just demolished someone's entire social existence with a few phone calls, but from the sheer overwhelming rush of seeing someone actually defend her, actually treat her like she mattered. Miss Taylor. Benjamin's voice had changed completely, all the ice melting into something that sounded almost gentle. Are you hurt? Mira looked down at herself at the wine-stained uniform and the glass shards near her shoes. I'm fine. I should clean this up. You should sit down before you fall down, he said, and there was a hint of amusement in his tone now. Your hands are shaking. I'm fine, Mira repeated, but her voice cracked on the last word, and suddenly she wasn't fine at all. She was a single mother covered in expensive wine in front of her boss's boss, and she'd just watched him destroy someone who probably had more lawyers than Mira had dollars in her bank account. And Nyla needed dinner, and the rent was due, and sit. It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't a suggestion either. Benjamin pulled out one of the expensive chairs and gestured to it. Please. The please did it. Mira sat. Benjamin shrugged off his suit jacket, a motion so smooth it looked choreographed, and draped it over her shoulders. It was still warm from his body heat, and it smelled like expensive cologne and something darker, more complex, power, maybe, or danger. You didn't have to do that, Mira said quietly, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. I could have handled it. I know you could have. Benjamin crouched down so they were at eye level, and Mira got her first real look at his face. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe mid-30s, with a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow and another barely visible along his jawline. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they studied her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through to her bones. The way you held yourself, the way you refused to break, that took more strength than anything I did. But you shouldn't have to handle that. Not here. Not anywhere. Women like her think they own the world, Mira said bitterly. Maybe they do. They don't. Benjamin's voice was absolute. Trust me on that. The world belongs to people who take it. And you? He paused, and something shifted in his expression. You're stronger than she could ever be. Mira laughed, but it came out too sharp, too raw. I'm a broke single mom who just got wine thrown in her face. I'm the opposite of strong. You stood there and held your head high while someone tried to break you. You didn't flinch. You didn't apologize for existing. Benjamin stood, offering her his hand. That's not weakness, Miss Taylor. That's power most people never find. His hand was warm and calloused in a way that surprised her. She'd expected soft business hands, not these weathered fingers that had clearly done more than sign checks. He pulled her to her feet easily, like she weighed nothing. Take the rest of the night off, Benjamin said. With pay. Actually, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting a black card that caught the light. Take tomorrow off too on me. I can't. You can and you will. He pressed the card into her hand, folding her fingers around it. Buy yourself something that makes you happy. Buy your daughter something that makes her smile. Hell, burn it if you want, but you're not spending tonight cleaning up someone else's cruelty. Mira looked down at the card, heavy metallic with his name embossed in silver letters. Benjamin Giordano. She'd heard that name before, whispered in the break room when the staff thought management couldn't hear. Rumors about family connections, about restaurants that were fronts for something darker, about a man who made people disappear. She should be terrified. Instead, wrapped in his jacket with his card in her hand, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Thank you, she whispered. Benjamin smiled, and it transformed his face completely. You're welcome, Mira. He used her name, not Miss or Ma'am or Waitress. Her actual name. As he walked toward the door, Mira called out, Mr. Giordano. He paused, looking back over his shoulder. Why did you do that? You don't even know me. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then maybe I want to. The door closed behind him, and Mira stood alone in the private dining room, wearing a Bioni jacket worth 6 months of rent, holding a black card with unlimited credit, and trying to remember how to breathe. Outside, the sun was setting over Central Park, painting the world in shades of amber and rose. And somewhere in the city, Benjamin Giordano was making phone calls that would reshape Callista White's entire existence. But that's not what kept Mira awake that night. What kept her awake was remembering the way he'd looked at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her. Like she was worth seeing. Like she was worth protecting. A single mother who spent her life being invisible just became visible to the most dangerous man in New York. But Benjamin Giordano's protection comes with complications that neither of them saw coming. Because here's what happened after that night. Benjamin didn't just ban Callista from his restaurants. He made 3 calls. Just 3. And by morning, the White family was in free fall. Hedge fund accounts frozen pending investigation. Society invitations were called. Business partners suddenly unavailable. One night of cruelty, and an entire empire started to crumble. But revenge is just the beginning of this story. Mira Taylor used that black card exactly once to buy her daughter Nyla a new winter coat because the old one had holes. She kept the receipt planning to pay him back. That's who she is. A woman who doesn't take charity, even for men who can buy and sell city blocks. Benjamin Giordano noticed. He notices everything about her. The way she shows up early to every shift, the textbook she reads during breaks. MBA-level coursework. The hole in her left shoe she thinks no one sees. The fierce pride that keeps her spine straight even when she's exhausted. He's not done protecting her. He's just getting started. 2 weeks after the incident, Myra's life started changing in ways she couldn't quite explain. First, there was the promotion. Victor pulled her aside during a lunch shift, looking confused and slightly terrified. Taylor, you're being moved to senior service manager, effective immediately. I'm what? Don't ask me to explain it. Victor handed her a new name tag and a significantly heavier paycheck. The order came from the top, way top, like penthouse office overlooking the entire city top. Mira stared at the paycheck. It was 3 times what she'd been making. Enough to move out of the studio apartment with the broken heater. Enough to buy Nyla new clothes that didn't come from Goodwill. Enough to actually accept that MBA scholarship. There's a mistake, she said. There's not. Victor lowered his voice. Listen, I don't know what you did or who you impressed, but Mr. Giordano doesn't make mistakes. Take the win, Taylor. God knows you've earned it. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like charity, like pity, like being visible for all the wrong reasons. The second change came in the form of a letter delivered to her apartment, not mailed, delivered by a man in a black suit who looked like he bench-pressed cars for fun. The envelope was heavy cream paper with a watermark she couldn't quite make out. Inside was an acceptance letter to the Columbia Executive MBA program she'd applied to. Full scholarship, all expenses paid. Starting next semester. At the bottom, in handwriting that looked like it belonged on a Declaration of Independence. You earned this. Use it. C.L. Mira sat on her second-hand couch and cried for the first time in 3 years. The third change arrived on a Wednesday evening when she was leaving her shift. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb and the back door opened. Benjamin Giordano sat inside, still wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary, reading something on a tablet. Miss Taylor, he said without looking up. Get in. Every instinct Mira had screamed at her to run. Women who got into expensive cars with powerful men rarely came out unchanged, but curiosity, or maybe something stupider, made her slide into the leather seat beside him. The door closed. The SUV pulled into traffic. "Where are we going?" Mira asked, proud that her voice stayed steady. "Dinner." Benjamin finally looked up from his tablet, and those dark eyes swept over her with an attention that made her skin feel too tight. "When was the last time you ate something that wasn't leftovers from the restaurant?" "I eat fine." "You eat scraps standing up in the kitchen during your break," he said flatly. "That's not eating, that's surviving. Surviving is all some of us get." Mira shot back and immediately regretted it. "You didn't snap at men like Benjamin Giordano. You didn't challenge them. You smiled and said yes and hoped they lost interest quickly, but Benjamin just smiled. There she is, the woman who stood in that dining room dripping with wine and refused to break. I was starting to think I'd imagined her." "What do you want from me?" The question came out more desperate than Mira intended. "The promotion, the scholarship, this. What's the price?" "The price?" Benjamin set down his tablet, giving her his full attention. "The price is you stop letting people like Callista White make you believe you're worth less than you are. The price is you take what you've earned and build something with it. The price is," he paused, and something flickered across his face. "The price is you let me take you to dinner, without assuming I'm going to demand something in return. Men like you always demand something. Men like me." Benjamin's laugh was dark and humorless. "You have no idea what kind of man I am, Mira." The use of her first name sent a shiver down her spine. "Then tell me." The SUV pulled up in front of a restaurant Mira had only seen in magazines, the kind of place that required reservations 6 months in advance and had a dress code enforced by velvet ropes and intimidating doormen. "I'm not dressed for this," Mira said, looking down at her work cloth. "You're dressed fine." Benjamin opened his door. "And anyone who has a problem with it will find themselves unemployed."
Come on.
The restaurant was all dark wood and candlelight, intimate tables tucked into corners where important people made deals that shaped the world. The maitre took one look at Benjamin and nearly tripped over himself, showing them to a private table by the window. Mira sat down, hyper-aware of the other diners glancing their way. A white woman with natural curls still damp from her shift, sitting across from a man who radiated power like other people radiated heat. "You still haven't told me what kind of man you are," Mira said once they were alone. Benjamin poured her wine, a gesture so casual and domestic it felt strange coming from him. "I'm the kind of man who protects what's his." "I'm not yours." "No," he agreed. "But you're under my protection now, which amounts to the same thing. Anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Mira didn't raise hers.
Why? Why?
"What? Why me? Why do you care what happens to some broke waitress you saw for 5 minutes?" Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Mira? I see someone who's been knocked down by life repeatedly and keeps getting back up. I see intelligence and strength and dignity that most people born with money never find. I see," he stopped, shook his head. "I see someone worth protecting." "Or you see a project," Mira said bitterly. "A charity case to make yourself feel better about whatever it is you do in the dark." Something dangerous flashed in Benjamin's eyes. "You want to know what I do in the dark? I run an empire that keeps this city functioning. I make sure the people who deserve protection get it, and the people who deserve consequences face them. I've done things that would give you nightmares, Mira. I've made decisions that cost lives." He leaned forward, and Mira couldn't look away from his intensity. "But I've never once pretended to be something I'm not. I'm not a good man. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who saw a woman treated like garbage and decided that wasn't going to stand. If that makes me a monster, so be it." "I never said you were a monster." "You thought it." Benjamin sat back the moment breaking. "And you're right, too. But here's the truth. Monsters are useful when they're on your side." The food arrived. Course after course of things Mira had only served, never tasted. Seared scallops that melted on her tongue. Wagyu beef, so tender it didn't need a knife. Dessert that looked like art. Through it all, Benjamin watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "I can't do this," Mira finally said, setting down her fork. "Whatever this is, whatever you think it is, I can't. I have a daughter. I have responsibilities. I can't be some powerful man's distraction. I don't want a distraction. Benjamin's voice was quiet, serious. I want. He stopped, shook his head. I don't know what I want yet, but I know I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night. The way you stood there refusing to break. The way you looked at me like I was dangerous and interesting in equal measure. You are dangerous.
Yes.
No denial, no excuse. But not to you. Never to you. You don't know that. I do.
Benjamin stood, offered his hand. Come with me. I want to show you something.
Every smart instinct Mira had told her to refuse to go home to Nyla and Mrs. Chen's apartment and her normal, safe, predictable life. But she took his hand anyway. They ended up on the rooftop of his building, 60 stories up, the city spreading out below them like a sea of lights. Manhattan glittered in every direction, alive and dangerous and beautiful. I bought this building 10 years ago, Benjamin said, standing at the edge, looking out over his empire. Started with nothing, a name that meant trouble and a chip on my shoulder the size of the city. Now I own half of it. He turned to face her. You know what that taught me? That power isn't about what you're born with. It's about what you're willing to fight for. Mira stepped closer, drawn despite herself. And what are you willing to fight for? A week ago, I would have said my business, my reputation, my empire. Benjamin reached out, tucking a loose curl behind her ear with surprising gentleness. Now I'm starting to think I've been fighting for the wrong things. His phone buzzed then again. Then it started ringing with a tone that made Benjamin's expression go cold and hard. I have to take this, he said, but his hand lingered on her face for one more moment. Don't move. He walked to the other side of the rooftop, his voice dropping to that lethal whisper Mira recognized from the dining room. She caught fragments. Told you to handle it. Unacceptable example of him. When he came back, the man who'd shown her gentleness was gone. The monster was back. We have a problem, Benjamin said flatly. And it involves you. Just when Mira Taylor thought her life couldn't get more complicated, she's about to discover that Benjamin Giordano's enemies are now her enemies. And his enemies don't play fair. Because here's what you need to understand about the man who's decided to protect her. Benjamin Giordano didn't build his empire through kindness. He built it through fear, calculated violence, and an absolute refusal to let anyone threaten what's his. And Mira, whether she's ready to admit it or not, has become his. The phone call Benjamin just received, it was about Callista White. Turns out the blonde socialite didn't take her 24-hour exit from New York. Instead, she made a call of her own to some people who don't care about Benjamin's reputation, who see his protection of a nobody waitress as weakness, who've decided that the fastest way to hurt him is to hurt her. They've already been to Myra's apartment building. They've asked Mrs. Chen questions about Nyla. They've taken pictures. Benjamin Giordano has built his entire life on control, on being 3 steps ahead of everyone else, on eliminating threats before they become problems. But for the first time in 10 years, he's feeling something that clouds that control. Genuine fear. Not for himself, for her. And a man like Benjamin Giordano afraid for someone he cares about. That's when the real danger begins. Tell me everything, Mira said, her voice steady despite the ice flooding her veins. Don't protect me from it. Just tell me. Benjamin looked at her for a long moment, something like respect flickering across his features. Then he pulled up photos on his phone. Surveillance footage of her apartment building time-stamped from this afternoon. A black sedan parked across the street. Men in dark clothes watching the entrance. One of them smoking casual like he had all the time in the world to wait. They're testing boundaries, Benjamin said quietly, seeing how far they can push before I react. Using you to get to me. Who are they? The Marchette's family. Rival organization. They've been trying to take territory from me for years, and now they think you're a weakness they can exploit. He put his phone away, and when he looked at her again, his eyes were black glass. They're wrong. You need to distance yourself from me. Mira said it firmly, even though something in her chest twisted at the words. If I'm a liability, if I'm putting you in danger, you're not putting me in danger. They are. Benjamin closed the distance between them in 2 strides. And I don't run from threats, Mira. I eliminate them. I have a daughter who is currently at Mrs. Chen's apartment with 4 of my best men stationed outside. She's safe. You're safe. They don't get to touch either of you. Myra's breath caught. You sent guards to protect Nyla. The second I got the call, Benjamin's hand cupped her face, and his touch was surprisingly gentle for someone who looked ready to murder. Did you really think I'd let anything happen to your daughter?
To you?
Something cracked open in Myra's chest, a wall she'd built carefully over years of learning that no one protected people like her, that she was on her own, that asking for help was the same as admitting defeat. I don't understand you, she whispered. You barely know me. I know enough. Benjamin's thumb traced her cheekbone. I know you work 3 jobs to keep your daughter fed. I know you're getting an MBA while serving entitled rich people who don't see you. I know you've been knocked down by life repeatedly and keep getting back up. I know. His voice dropped. I know that watching someone throw wine at you made me feel something I haven't felt in 10 years.
What?
Human. The word was raw, honest. I've spent a decade building an empire that requires me to be cold, calculated, merciless. I've made decisions that cost lives. I've done things that would horrify you, but watching you stand there refusing to break, it reminded me that there are still things worth protecting. People worth protecting. I'm not some damsel who needs saving.
No.
Benjamin smiled, and it was real this time. You're a warrior who's been fighting alone for too long. Let me fight with you. And if I say no, then I protect you anyway, he said simply. But it'll be easier if you let me do it properly.
If you trust me.
Trust, such a simple word for such a complicated thing. Mira had learned early that trust was a luxury people like her couldn't afford. That the moment you depended on someone, they left. Her father, her ex-boyfriend, every employer who'd promised advancement and delivered nothing. But Benjamin Giordano looked at her like she was something precious, like she mattered, like he'd burn the entire city down before he let someone hurt her. Maybe that should terrify her. Instead, it made her feel alive for the first time in years. What do we do? Mira asked. Benjamin's smile turned sharp and dangerous. We send a message. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity that Mira watched from the protected bubble of Benjamin's penthouse. He'd insisted she stay there just until this is handled. And she'd agreed only because Amira was there too, delighted by the enormous space and the game room Benjamin apparently never used. You have a daughter, Amira had asked Benjamin with the brutal honesty of 7-year-olds. Where is she? I don't have children, Benjamin had replied, kneeling down to Amira's level. But if I did, I'd want them to be as brave as you are. Amira had beamed. Myra's heart had done something complicated. Now, watching the sunset paint the city gold from Benjamin's living room, Mira felt like she was living in someone else's life. The penthouse was all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture, art on the walls that probably cost more than most people's houses. It's too much, she said when Benjamin joined her. All of this, the protection, the apartment, the it's not enough, Benjamin interrupted. He handed her a glass of wine. Good wine, the kind served in his restaurants. The Marchettes made their move 3 hours ago. They hit one of my warehouses on the waterfront. Myra's stomach dropped. People were hurt. No, because I moved everyone out yesterday. Benjamin's smile was cold. I've been in this business long enough to see attacks coming. They think they're being strategic. They're actually being predictable. What happens now? Now Benjamin took a sip of his wine. Now I show them what happens when they threaten what's mine. There's a building in Tribeca used to be Marchette's territory until they lost it in a bad deal 5 years ago. As of 1 hour ago, I own it, and the 3 properties around it, and the dock access they use for imports. You're taking their territory. I'm taking everything.
There was no mercy in his voice.
They want to play games with you, as the stakes. Fine, I'll play. But when I play for keeps. Mira should be horrified, should be repulsed by the casual way he talked about destroying another family's business. But all she could think was, he's doing this for me, Benjamin. She set down her glass. This has to stop. This war, this revenge, it's too much. I'm not worth don't. He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands framing her face. Don't you dare say you're not worth it. You're worth everything, Mira. You're worth more than this city, more than my empire, more than he stopped, his eyes searching hers, more than I knew anything could be worth.
You don't mean that.
I've never meant anything more. Benjamin leaned his forehead against hers, and for a moment, he wasn't a mafia boss or a business mogul or a dangerous man. He was just human, vulnerable, real. I've spent 10 years building power because I thought that's what mattered.
Control, fear, respect.
But watching you with your daughter, seeing the way you fight for what you love, you've made me realize I've been fighting for the wrong things. What are you saying? I'm saying Benjamin pulled back just enough to look at her properly. I'm saying that for the first time in my life, I'm terrified. Not of the Marchettes, not of losing territory or money or power. I'm terrified of losing you, of you looking at me one day and seeing only the monster. I see the monster, Mira said honestly. But I also see the man who protected my daughter before he protected his warehouses, who bought me dinner instead of demanding anything in return, who looks at me like I'm everything, Benjamin finished. Because you are. He kissed her then, soft at first, questioning, giving her the chance to pull away. But Mira didn't pull away. She leaned in, letting herself fall into the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of being wanted, chosen, protected. When they finally broke apart, Benjamin rested his forehead against hers again. The Marchettes will back off. I'll make sure of it. And then he paused. And then I want to take you to dinner again and again, as many times as you'll let me. Is that what powerful men do? Mira asked, unable to stop her smile. Ask permission? This powerful man does, when it's you. Benjamin's thumb traced her bottom lip. I want to do this right, Mira. I want to give you the life you deserve. The one you've been fighting for. I can build my own life. I know that's what makes you extraordinary. He kissed her forehead. But let me stand beside you while you do it. Let me protect you while you become everything you're meant to be. Through the windows, the city glittered with possibility. In the next room, Nyla laughed at something on the television, safe and happy and unaware of the war being waged in her honor. And in Benjamin Giordano's arms, Mira Taylor finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to fight alone anymore. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Benjamin smiled. And it was beautiful. Okay. 6 months later, Mira Taylor stood in her new office, managing partner at Giordano Hospitality Group, overseeing 15 restaurants across Manhattan, and marveled at how much could change in half a year. The Marchettes had backed off after Benjamin acquired the last piece of territory they needed for their operations. Callista White had moved to Los Angeles, her New York reputation thoroughly destroyed, and Mira had graduated from Columbia's MBA program with honors. But the biggest change was standing in her doorway right now. Benjamin Giordano holding a bouquet of flowers that Nyla had insisted were Mommy's favorites, looking at Mira like she'd hung the moon. Ready to go home? He asked. Home? They're home now. The penthouse where Nyla had her own room, where Mira fell asleep every night in Benjamin's arms, where they built something that looked remarkably like forever. Always, Mira said, taking his hand, and meant it. From invisible waitress to managing partner, from struggling single mother to protected and cherished. Mira Taylor's transformation wasn't about being saved by a powerful man. It was about a powerful man recognizing her strength and choosing to stand beside her while she claimed everything she'd always deserved. Benjamin Giordano learned that true power isn't about control or fear. It's about protecting the people who make you want to be better. It's about using your strength to lift up someone who's been fighting alone for too long. Together, they built something more powerful than any empire. A partnership based on respect, trust, and the kind of love that transforms both people involved. This story proves that sometimes the most dangerous men have the biggest hearts. That dignity and strength shine brighter than any designer dress. That family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand with you when the world tries to knock you down. And that the best revenge, living well, building something beautiful, and never ever letting the cruel people win. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from and share your thoughts about the story. And don't forget to like, Subscribe and share this video as your support is important for me to continue creating content.